Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event. My name is Dr. Chrissy Mangafa. I am the Deputy Director of Studies at Metropolitan College, Greece, and I co-convene the Special Interest Group Children and Childhoods with Rita Chola-Dagan, who is a Senior Lecturer in the Department of Education at University of Bath. Allow me to say a few words about our SIG now. The aim of our SIG Children and Childhoods is to explicate, develop, and enhance understandings of children and young people and their childhoods. This includes how childhoods are shaped socially, historically, and culturally, and how the relational child experiences the educational institutions and forces that mediate their life. A particular strength of our SIG is that it fosters interdisciplinary discussions and collaborations, and that it enables interrogation of the boundaries and transitions in children's lives, including from early years up to adolescence and beyond, and how these are shaped and informed by formal and informal education. Now, Rita is going to tell you a little bit about today's SIG event.
Thank you, Chrissy. And thank you, delegates, for participating in our introductory poll question, which was, what do you think are the most important issues that could transform children's relationships for the better in current times? We'll be returning to your responses a little later. The title of today's SIG event is Transforming Children's Relationships, a Collage of Experience. The key organising panel for this event are postgraduate researchers in the Department of Education at the University of Bath. They are Joy Crantham, Mitali Dutta, and Hannah Hogarth. Their timely PhD research interests reflect the themes of this event. The themes are about changing relationships childhood has with technology, with pedagogy, both formal and informal, with nature, and with families. And the keynotes and image-based snapshot presentations today reflect those themes. Just to tell you a little about the structure of today's event, we begin with two keynote speakers, and my colleague Chrissy will introduce them to you. The organising panel will then introduce the first set of snapshot presentations. We'll then have the first set of presentations, followed by a 10-minute break. After the break, the panel organisers will then introduce a second set of snapshot presentations, which will be presented. And then I'll open the floor for question time at the end of the second set of speakers. But do jot down your questions as they occur to you throughout the event and write them in the chat, which is on the right-hand side of your event screen. Chrissy and I will conclude the event with a summary of the key issues, and the organising panel will give us an indication of how they see the next steps for transforming childhood. The event will end at 6 p.m. Please feel free to tweet on the event on @BERA-News or #BERA_transform. Now it's time to introduce our keynote speakers. Chrissy?
It is with great pleasure that I present to you two dear former colleagues of mine who are experts in the field of early childhood. The keynote speakers are Dr. Paulette Love and Dr. Malika Kanil. Dr. Paulette is Senior Lecturer at the School of Education at Anglia Ruskin University. Paulette's doctoral research focused upon understandings and uses of child observation in early years settings, revealing the significance of practitioners seeing and knowing of young children. This has led to two related areas of research and publication. Firstly, about childhood observation and ethics of care, and secondly, educators' learning and professional development. Dr. Malika is course leader and senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University. Malika's current research interest is around the usefulness of participatory research and its place as an alternative approach to conventional research in education contexts. Her research focuses around the pedagogical uses of participatory approaches in early years, as well as in higher education. She has published this work under the strand of children's participatory rights in early years and students' voice in higher education. The title of the presentation today is Relational Understandings of Children and Childhoods, Some Implications for Practice-Based Research. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chrissy. And thank you for that kind introduction. We're really pleased to be back and it's nice to see you again. Malika and I are members of the Early Childhood Research Group at Anglia Ruskin University. And so we're really pleased to be joining the seminar today, sharing some of our ideas with you, giving a flavour of our interpretation of the theme of relational childhoods in a contemporary context. And it's really lovely for us to have the opportunity to put our pieces into the collage of experience that we're going to try to construct this afternoon. So our aims, in line with the aims of the event, are to offer some ideas about the relational child, which I will begin with, and to share some experiences and insights from our close to practice research, and Malika will lead on that part. And we aim to just raise some questions for you as our fellow educational researchers to consider. And we're really looking forward to the dialogues and the discussions that are going to take place this afternoon. "400 years ago, the English metaphysical poet John Donne wrote a very famous meditation entitled No Man is an Island. And that encapsulated those many years ago, the important idea that nobody lives or exists alone, and that as human beings, we are all interconnected and part of larger wholes. And culture and society are key to our human existence and our experience, and we are constantly shaped by our collective experience. So similarly, no child is an island, and children are born into families. They're immediately nurtured in dyadic relationships with their main caregivers, often their birth mother and father. So children are born into those dyadic relationships, and they continue to grow and develop and live in relation to other people and places and things. Interactions with their families, with their friends, with their peers and communities continue to influence children and to shape their childhoods, as well as the environments that they live in and the materials that they play with and interact with. And it's not a passive process. As anyone who's lived or worked with young children, even for a short time, knows, children are active and agentic, and they also have a great impact upon their own surrounding. So this important understanding of childhoods as relational makes demands on us as researchers of childhood, because when we encounter the children who participate in our research, we have to recognise that their experiences and ours are situated or entangled, depending on your theoretical perspective, with multiple other influences. There. Okay. So similarly, no researcher is an island. And in order to understand the relational child, we can perhaps begin with ourselves, even though our childhoods existed in different times and perhaps in very different places from the children and childhood that you're researching. Perhaps it's easy to recall the people and the places that influenced your childhood, or maybe those memories are a little bit hazy. We often ask our students that we work with at Anglia Ruskin to think about their own childhoods in order to understand children. And some people have very clear and happy, positive childhood memories. Other people have hazy memories or sometimes even painful ones. But often there are certain smells or tastes or sounds that can take us right back to our childhood and remember the people who are significant to us and how we made sense of the world. So I think it can be valuable as a point of reflection for us as researchers who have an interest in childhood to think how our own childhood shaped us and how that might continue to influence the work we do and the ways we work. When the people who are children now in 2021 look back on their childhoods, we wonder how they'll view the influence of the COVID-19 pandemic and how they'll remember that. Certainly childhoods lived in lockdown have been very different from anything that previous generations have experienced. Children's lives have been changed by coronavirus in different ways, depending upon their ages and their home circumstances. But most children have had much reduced access to childcare and education and to other informal educational and health services and experiences. During lockdowns, many parents had to manage their children at home all day whilst also working from home, or they were doing stressful jobs to keep our society functioning as essential workers, and children in all of those cases were often isolated from friends and from their extended family. And some families experienced the stresses of illness, of bereavement, of unemployment, of increased poverty. And sadly, there was a documented rise in domestic violence. So for some children, especially those who are at a social and economic disadvantage, there's a risk that the effects of the pandemic could cast a long and lasting shadow over their lives. Other children might remember the pandemic in a more blissful way, as a time when they were able to be close as a family, to go on walks and bicycle rides that they didn't normally have time or opportunities to do. But just as COVID-19 has had an impact on children, it's had an impact on researchers too. Perhaps you've had to modify your research approaches. And certainly some researchers have responded really quickly and imaginatively to illuminate the current context, and including some researchers who've recognised that children themselves have some valuable insights about their COVID-19 experiences to share. But our thinking and our approach to the relational child started long before the current circumstances in which we find ourselves, and went back about 15 years to a conference that was held at Anglia Ruskin University, run by our early childhood research group on the theme of relational pedagogy. And at that time, as Chrissy mentioned in the introduction, I myself was researching understandings and uses of child observation in early childhood settings. And then, as now, I see the potential of observation as a tool for relational practice and for research. It is such an important way for human beings to tune into the feelings and the responses of others. And I think that attentive looking and listening, being aware of the relationship that you're in with the child when you're carefully watching, recording those observations, reflecting upon and analysing those relationships, not coming to judgments too quickly, but really thinking about what you've heard and what you've seen, and thinking about possible interpretations, can be very revealing, especially if you discuss those with other people who are also close to the child or have knowledge of the child. And when children are old enough, the child themselves, they can be a very valuable means of coming to see and know young children. Today, I've had the pleasure of being with my 2.5-year-old grandchild for most of the day, and I was obviously observing her not as a professional or as a researcher, but in a relation with her as a granddaughter, and as a doting, as most people know, grandmother. But I was noticing how at the moment she loves to pile up different things. And first of all, in her house, she was making and transporting piles of plastic figures that represent the cartoon that has been a big part of her life during lockdown. She could do a PhD in Bing and in his own. Later on, at our house, she had a washing up bowl, and the things of our cultural context, she was piling into the washing up bowl plates and knives and forks. And then later, she was playing with some wooden figures that 3 generations of our family had played with, some wooden houses and churches and animals, and she was piling those into a bowl and then moving that from place to place. And it's fascinating to see the sense that she's making of the world around her and the connections she's making at a young age, and how she's supported to do that. So we haven't got time here to talk about the 15 years of our research that have taken place between my first interest in child observation and now. But from that time onwards, we've been exploring the links between people and places and ideas, and the importance of those links in encounters between educators and children and researchers. And I'm going to hand over to Malika, who's going to share some insights from our recent research projects. Thank you, Malika.
Thank you, Paulette. I shall continue from where Paulette left, and just give you little snapshots of some of the research projects that we have been engaged with. As our relational approach to research, when I say our, I mean the Early Childhood Research Group at Anglia Ruskin. And our relational approach to research with and about children, like Paulette said, has been inspired from the idea of relational pedagogy, a concept that we explored during the international conference we hosted at Anglia Ruskin in 2007. But since then, we have been working on different research projects and further exploring the relational approaches to understanding childhood. And especially research that is close to practice, because we are not practitioners ourselves in early childhood settings, but research that is close to practice and that involves children, the early years learning environment, and the adults working with the children. And of particular importance is the way we approach our research with the other educators in practice. In order to understand the relational perspective in education and care, it is vital for us to first overcome that school or earlier settings and university, or what we usually call the research and practice divide. And we believe that recognition of the multiple positions of expertise, that you can be expert in research area, but teachers, for example, or practitioners, have got expertise within their own practice. So this recognition of the multiple positions of expertise actually helps us to bridge this divide. And it has helped us to understand each of the context better. So these are some of the ideas we have been building upon in our relational approaches of understanding childhood, especially research that is based more around practice. An example that we will share here in some of the following slides is from a research project that was funded by Paul Hamlin Foundation and the Royal Opera House Bridge, where we worked with 45 different primary schools in Essex. And the aim of the project, although the bigger aim was to look at the use of different arts forms and their influence on children's creative writing. But for us as researchers, because teachers were going to participate in research as well. So before we could approach children, we thought it was really important for us to build a secure relationship with the teachers. So we made use of some twilight sessions where the teachers and the researchers would get together and they would meet and co-conceptualize the research processes or some of the vital concepts of research. So we have a common understanding of what's going to happen and who knows what and how can we co-construct those ideas together. So although we had understanding of the research methodologies, however, we recognized that the teachers were experts in understanding the classroom reality. So that's where the mutual relationship built, where we could explore the ideas of childhood within the classroom environments. And what it shows in this slide is the relationships between adults, children, and the children and children themselves. Like Paul had suggested earlier, that children, they grow, they develop, they live constantly in relation to other people, places, and things. So this means that the experiences that they encounter in schools, in earlier settings, for example, they will have a profound impact upon their learning and development. So the activities, as you can see from this slide, that we have mostly been using in research are inspired from the relational interactive approach, where children are sort of, provided with the opportunities to participate in various formal and informal activities with adults and also with their peers. So sorts of activities that we have been engaging with in research through class teachers or through different gatekeepers have mostly been of the nature that we can see on this slide. That's what I say to Paulette. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the relational approach to these interactive and participative activities, we believe it honed children's participation skills. And in our research, and I probably can explain you some of these examples in a minute, in our research, we recognize them as competent contributors and agentic learners. The opportunities that guide them to interact with the environment, for example, in the classroom environment, with the peers, with the adults, it does help to develop agency amongst the children. And hence, it just contributes to our understanding of a contemporary childhood. And the example in this slide are from a practice-based research where children were encouraged to participate in classroom activities, to give some feedback on their learning, and also on the learning and teaching approaches used by the teacher in the classroom. Like I said earlier, this project made use of some creative activities like different arts forms, like dance, drama, and music, to help children with their creative writing. So the activities here, as you can see on the slide, these were used in the classroom, where the children were encouraged to give their feedback, for example, to share their learning, the stage of their learning. So very simple everyday activities that really helped children to participate, to take an active role in their own learning in the classrooms. And the teacher was able to get some quick feedback and what's working, what's not working, what could be changed. Again, while in conjunction with the children, by discussing those ideas together with the children. So in our researches, we have been trying to see, or we do see children as competent contributors, and we regard them as agentic learners. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. And we believe that another important aspect to understanding relational childhood is to understand children's activities in groups. And anyone who works with children or who has worked with children in past would understand the demands of the prescriptive curriculum and how little the time teachers actually have in hand to engage in meaningful participatory or activities with the children. So images on this slide just show some examples of group participation where children are encouraged to work with each other in pairs or in small groups, or even as a whole class in sharing their views on various classroom activities. Because one of the problems that we often hear from teachers is, I just haven't got much time to talk to them individually, for example. So activities like this, which we have been using in our research, again, in partnership with the teachers, because we come with the methodological ideas, and then they come with the classroom expertise, the realities of the classroom, what works in classroom, what doesn't work in classroom. So we co-constructed some of these activities together. As you can see, like the use of the barometer, where children can just, again, mark their level of understanding of whatever was being taught. You can see one of the Venn diagrams of the class charter, like the class rules, where there was the teacher's views, what the classroom rules should be, the pupil's view, and then in the middle, you can see some sort of common understanding, shared understanding of the class rules, and then those becomes the final rules. So these are just some of the examples that we have taken from our research to share with you, where the agentic nature of children's participation has been recognized. Next slide, please. And we would like to end this presentation on a note that in order to really understand relational childhood, we cannot really ignore the importance of a relational culture in which children thrive. So through our research and practice, we do try to find opportunities for facilitating participative dialogues amongst different participants. And again, going back to Paulette's earlier slides, where she was talking about that children are not passive beings and that they too get influence, or they can influence what they observe through research. Therefore, we try to create a culture, for example, a classroom culture, a school culture, earlier settings culture, where children can observe good practice amongst adults too. There's no good trying to promote a very participative democratic culture amongst the children, and as adults, we ignore it ourselves. So it's the whole idea of creating a culture of relationships, of participation, of democracy, of voice, of building capacity of each other and listening with a purpose. And children, they do not grow in isolation, and what they observe around them would influence their learning and development. So by creating a more respectful, interactive, and a more participative environment, we enrich the experiences of being, becoming, and belonging. Next slide, please. So really just point for a reflection in the end is who or what influences the children who participate in your research, in your practices. So just something to think about, what actually influences them and what are we leaving as adults, the influences we leave them with that can change their behavior, that can alter their behavior, that or can provide them much more constructive activities for participation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Malika and Paulette, for your very insightful and provoking presentation. This is an exciting day to get together, for us to get together and develop our relationships and connections as we're advocating for children to do in their classroom settings. The initial conversations that I had, it seems like a very long time ago, with Hannah and Mitali, when we were first developing this webinar, coincided with the pandemic and other global events that magnified inequality and power, privilege, based injustices. And we wondered what these cataclysms might mean for the relational child. Globally, positions of power were being challenged because Black Lives Matter. The climate is facing crisis, and women have a right to feel safe. While these paradigms were shifting, the pandemic kept us in our homes. Thousands of people were dying daily, and when children were considered, politicians described lost generations. While fortunate children were muting themselves to continue their education, others struggled in technological poverty. We are 3 PhD candidates who started having conversations about our perspectives and understandings of childhoods, and we wanted to extend the discussion further. We aren't experts about the entangled relationships children navigate in their lives. We are experts in our own tiny fields of interest. And we are curious about how we can link our fields and expand our understandings and awarenesses together.
Thank you, Joy. As you have rightly mentioned, that digital inequality has intensified as a result of the pandemic, leading to gaps in education and opportunities, especially for children who are poor and vulnerable. The UN policy brief on the impact of COVID on children, April 20, suggests that children are not the face of this pandemic, but they risk being among its biggest victims. All children of all ages and in all countries are affected. But the harmful effects are not distributed equally. They are most damaging in the poorest of countries and in the poorest of neighborhoods. The World Food Programme has warned of a hunger pandemic, whereby tens of millions of children worldwide face extreme poverty because of the effects of COVID. The UNICEF report on addressing the effects of COVID-19 on children, adolescents, and mothers in South Asia notes that about 420 million children have been out of school in this region alone due to school closures, and about 9 million are expected to drop out. Around 50% of them will be girls. This in turn has led to an increase in child marriages and adolescent pregnancies. Child mortality, maternal deaths, malnutrition have risen significantly in many parts of the world, making children the prime casualty of this crisis.
Thanks, Matali. Yeah, these are such sobering thoughts. And as Joy said, it can be really difficult to move beyond our bubbles and our areas of research that we kind of feel so comfortable in, and to think beyond our own experiences. And one of the things that we discussed in our conversations about childhoods is the fact that they're not homogenous, but they're diverse and complex, nuanced and multi-layered. The snapshots that we're about to present help us to widen our perspectives about these relationships, the relationships that make up childhoods, and they challenge us to explore the relational child within these complex webs. Here we offer 7 snapshots into research with childhood. They are each going to be 5 minutes long, and they are image-based presentations that we hope will provoke and resonate. In the first set of 4, I'll begin by presenting on childhood nature and play. And then I'll move to Sarah, who's going to discuss her work with the integration of refugee children in a school context. Marianne will then discuss children's relationship with materials and digital technology in the early years. And Fadwa will present her work with home-educated teenagers. Following these, we will take a short break before ending with our final 3 snapshots. And we want to share this collage of experiences and invite you to add to this collage in our time at the end for discussion. So, so these are the first 4 that we're going to go through. And I will start with my one on childhood nature and inseparable relationship. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Bath, and my research looks at outdoor play during forest school sessions in early year settings in the UK. With concerns about the amount of time children are spending playing outdoors, many educators are finding ways to give children opportunities for outdoor play in nature. This practice resists the dominant approaches in early childhood education, where children are placed indoors with teacher-led activities and are focused on predetermined outcomes. Karen Morris, in her book, The Post-Human Child, challenges figurations of child that seem to place the child as lacking, as deficit. The ignorant child is seen as lacking rationality and needing training. They are blank slates, as enlightened thinker John Locke put it. The innocent child is nature's child, a romantic view that sees childhood as the golden age of a child's life, and one that needs to be kept as separate from the surrounding world as possible. A world that is, in Morris's words, violent, oppressive, commercialized, and exploitive. Children in these figurations are marginalized and discriminated against, particularly those in poverty. Morris offers a post-human reconfiguration of the child, where the child is relational and part of the world. The child is enmeshed in a web of material and discursive forces. And I found this really useful in my own work with children. Children are not lesser beings, separate from adults or disconnected from nature, but are rich, resourceful and resilient. And through relationships with humans and non-human others, they emerge. I use this post-human concept of childhood nature in my work, which argues that children are nature. This photo highlights the ways that humans and non-humans emerge together through entangled encounters. In the image, we see the sun reflecting trees on water, leaves have got stuck to boots and mud, and 2 children are shrieking with glee as they fling ripples across the puddle. It highlights the joy we get from creating mutual connections when we make kin with other children, with other species, with materials in the more than human world. While studying children's play in a forest school, I was told by one child that I needed to put my notebook down and go and play with them. And this is something that led to numerous insights and is really the way I've continued to research ever since. The child seemed to know that I would gain more from joining in rather than simply standing back. I've continued to do this and now work with children as co-researchers, and together we contribute to a shared journal, add pictures, collect objects, wear wearable cameras in order to record our experiences that we can then watch back together and analyse. So what happened then when I played with the children? I soon found myself hiding in a bush, experiencing the sense of fear of being found and the exhilaration that you feel when you run down a hill. I got to be a baby and then an older sister and then a zoo owner chasing an escaped tiger from a zoo. The play was not about filling up ignorant minds, but about experiencing and discovering. The play was not about protecting children from risks, but about managing risks as they emerged. One child tripped over a tree root and bruised their knee, and another slipped down a muddy bank. We had to learn how to play with these hazards. Emotional risks were taken too. What does it feel like to be chased or to be caught? What does it feel like to capture and to have power? What do you do with the power when you have it? Dark emotions and deep philosophical problems were explored. Play, childhood, and nature should not be romanticised. Africa Taylor's work recasts childhood as messy and implicated rather than pure and innocent. During my research, a baby tree was pulled up and torn apart, and stones were knocked over, causing another child to cry. Nature itself is not separate, but entangled in real-world relations. In my current ongoing research with children in an inner-city urban forest school, areas were deemed out of bounds for fear of dangerous litter, such as needles and broken bottles. Children without hats, gloves, and waterproof footwear couldn't access all of these activities. And lack of safe access to green spaces in local areas can make children feel uncomfortable with picking up dirty apples or muddy sticks. As Taylor makes clear in her Reconfiguring the Natures of Childhood, childhoods are situated and differentiated, not decontextualised and universal. The current political discourse about post-pandemic education focuses on children needing to catch up or about being behind, not on the freedom, time and space that they need to become part of the world. Children cannot be separated from the worlds in which they inhabit. Nature and culture are not binaries that can be divided. Humans are having a greater and more destructive impact on the planet than any previous generation, and this requires a shift in our thinking that does not sever child from nature, but that explores the ways in which we are nature. Educational opportunities for a variety of encounters between humans and non-human nature during outdoor play is one way that we can learn to support more livable futures. I'm now going to pass on to Sarah, who's going to start her snapshot now.
Sorry, hello. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sarah. That's great.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. So in this, thank you so much, Hannah and Joy and Mitali. So in this 5-minute presentation, I'm going to present one snapshot of the collage of narratives and experiences explored by refugee children. My research basically focuses on a narrative construction to explore integration processes that refugee children, particularly from sub-Saharan countries, have in Algeria. This snapshot represents one of the crucial ideas that I am discussing in my research throughout my data collection. I have observed a very complex educational setting, a national school with refugee and non-refugees, issues of integration, particularly for refugees, integration processes. The context at first was in the case that all refugees who are in the city of Algiers were allocated to different schools according whether they spoke Arabic or French. The inclusion of refugees into the national schools was primarily structural. No other criteria were taken into consideration. So as you can see in this snapshot, on the right side of the picture, there is Sami's drawing. Sami is a 13-year-old Malian refugee. While constructing his narrative on the notion of belonging, he drew a picture of the classroom. Sami explained his drawing saying, "This is my classroom," I'm quoting, "there is the teacher, and these are the students. I have asked him where he was in the picture, and he said, I don't sit there, I always sit at the back. I'm not in the picture. Him saying I'm not in the picture and him defining where he sits is exactly how the classroom was arranged. The first observation that kept on occurring throughout the first 3 months of the data collection was the clear borders I could see in the classroom, the culture that was developing between students and the patterns that kept on repeating every day were massively informed by the context. As you can see on the left side of the picture, there is an approximate adaptation of the classroom seating pattern that reflects the narrative Sami and his mates enforced throughout the data collection. This was one picture of the collage of experiences children refugee presented and explored in this research. It was a collection of workshops that I adapted the LVE program to tackle values, to explore these issues. The LVE stands for Living Values Education, and it encourages the use of values in the educational program, especially for refugees, and it was proved to help a lot with many issues in the classroom. So in one of these classes, this narrative emerged. Storytelling activities explored in this that were explored in this research highlighted different conceptualizations of relations with students, with their classmates, with their teachers, with the spaces they chose to sit in, as you can see, where Malino children are, where Chadi people are. So it's really very clear the borders, how they were formed. These relations have informed the relational aspects of the integration process, as we have to mainly in the literature discuss relational and structural aspects of integration. The structural aspect was there, but the relational aspect was absolutely not there. It enabled children, the storytelling activities and the workshops enabled children to connect and relate to different elements around them. Throughout the data collection and the intervention with the storytelling activities, children showed much closeness in terms of this space they used, in terms of the participation rate and whom they would pair up as a group work or pair work. The inclusion of refugee children in national schools in Algeria occurred structurally, as I said. So refugee students were allocated to the national schools according to their language. After this study, I have raised the issue with the schools and with the NGOs that were responsible for this, and it is being reviewed, luckily, this year. In the national school setting I explored, students were positioned not only by the government or the NGO, the laws there, the parents, the school, the teachers, everything helped for the context to develop as such, as you can see it now. The school was a prestigious school where national students went to, as it adapts to the Francophone system. The other part of it was the social cohesion and the lack of social connectedness between students and the very different, two different worlds that were present in the classroom. These narratives are multifaceted aspects of the child's experience. The intention to use storytelling activities helped me reveal and reflect on these experiences myself as a researcher. It helped children, refugees themselves, who I prefer to call young tellers, to reflect on their own experiences internally and socially. They can be used educationally and they can be used for different reasons, but mainly I've used them to discover what's the context to do with the relational aspects and how it can promote any kind of integration, specifically relational integration. It was very good to see how the classroom changed from this, as you can see it from both sides, to a very more coherent aspect. I wish I can have more slides to show you more narratives that support this one. But this is the main narrative or the main snapshot I want to contribute with to this amazing snapshots and collage of experiences. But at the end, I just wanted to say that implementing the storytelling activities in the classroom in this research made me realize how the relational aspects can change the whole educational experience and the integration experience of a refugee child. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now we're going to pass on. That was really fascinating and really enjoyed that. And we're now going to move on to Mariam.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Mariam Krayem, and I will be talking about the digital technology and the early years in Lebanon and in England, and how we can promote the fine motor skills in the early years using the digital technology. The purpose of this, the reason why I have this picture is that tabbouleh is a traditional Lebanese salad, which is made of finely chopped vegetables, and that's mainly made of parsley. And other than being a healthy salad, I will be using this picture or this salad as a way of explaining my own research. You would be surprised if I tell you that I'm not the only person who can make this salad. A 3 or 4 years old can make this salad too. So what are the skills that they require to make this salad? Fine motor skills involve the use of small hand muscles and vision to coordinate increasingly precise and accurate actions to achieve behavioral goals. These are essential in our everyday lives and in education being the basis of our writing. So how is this bowl of salad linked to those skills? Consider the ingredients of this tabbouleh as the elements that constitute and promote the fine motor skills. For example, I'm looking at the activities in the early years classrooms in Lebanon and in England, what teachers provide to children as tools to play, and the teacher's method to help the children develop their fine motor skills. Looking at the elements of the research as the ingredients of this salad individually, considering the parsley as the tools that are provided to by the teachers in the classrooms, the tomatoes are the children, and the whole dressing is the environment. So when we combine all of those together, each child has a different way to create a different type of food, which is the activity in my research. So this is an affordance of the food ingredient and the educational tools that could be used differently by each child. Technology was not observed while conducting the research as much as I expected, so it was a missing ingredient in this case, and the teachers explained why this is not part of the recipe. When teachers enhance the tasks and the environment of the children, they influence their fine motor skills output positively. They give them better possibilities and opportunities to practice and use their fine motor skills. Affordances for fine motor skills development are not easy to compare across different cultures. Every country has its own way of using those tools and materials. Therefore, new components of theoretical frameworks for teachers should be designed to support teaching of fine motor skills for young children. Teachers already know the typical ages and stages of the development of fine motor skills, and this is in the curriculum of both countries. But my research suggests that there could be value in new ways of teaching fine motor skills in the early years. Sorry, I'm not able to share the tabbouleh due to COVID. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Yes, I would love to taste that as well. We are going to now move to Fadwa, who's going to be talking to the image that I'm just about to share.
Hi, Hannah, can you just tell me that if you hear me clearly?
Yes, that's very clear. Thanks, Fadwa.
Sometimes my microphone doesn't like Zoom. Yeah, hello. Thank you for this lovely event. My name is Fadwa Govert, and I am also a PhD candidate at the University of Bath in the Department of Education. My image has to do with my PhD research, and the lockdown really, as we have heard from other speakers, has had an effect on childhood and on their learning, and specifically given children also in the schooling system as well as those in alternative provisions, also an opportunity maybe for them to work at their own pace, have their own time and their own space to rediscover their interest and develop and adapt their learning methods. My research project explores the experience of home-educated adolescents. All my participants are between the age of 13 and 16, and they are all home-educated prior to COVID and continued up until now. I'd like to make a clear distinction that homeschooling, which we are all familiar with, is very different than home education. because homeschooling was forced upon children in the schooling system and on families, whereas home education is an option that families, parents decided to go down that route, who wanted to opt out of the schooling system. So the approaches and the motives and the priorities of homeschooling and home education are very different. My research methodology is based on participatory research methodology, and my participants were all researchers, just like Hannah, and they were allowed to collect data in any way they felt appropriate concerning their educational outcomes. Examples of data collections were blogs, visual boards, and in this case, a vlog. This is a still image taken from a vlog and one of my participants or researcher. I call him Danny, and Danny collected his data and performed his analysis. And he believed it indicated that the importance of technology in his home education was amplified during COVID restrictions. And whereas before it was more about connecting with tutors, or his relationship with technology was more of seen as a resource or as a tool. During lockdown, he discovered actually it was his way of finding and reconnecting with his love for learning. It also allowed him to not only play games, but also socialize with his friends, which he wasn't able to do as a home educator during lockdown, because whereas schools did go back at some point, home educators were not allowed to go back to their social events. I believe this image of a still image of his vlog really captures the inequality that Danny experienced through the mainstream education, because this explains why he was led to home education. Prior to COVID, Danny felt very left out, isolated in the classroom. He felt behind academically. He felt the constant need to be catching up with his peers. It was a very stressful experience. COVID transformed his concept of learning as he discovered his new interests and new passions for different subjects. He found a space to enjoy his education and enjoy his learning. In his final report, he writes, "The data shows that my home education journey has allowed me to learn about different types of things. For example, it has let me learn about cars, history, geography of Egypt through gaming. I play every night, for example, Assassin's Creed. It teaches me where places are. I learned how to read a map, and I learned about places in Egypt. I also learned about the pyramids." Danny also began to enjoy writing. Finding it difficult to put words on paper, he struggled in the school system. Now he has discovered a passion for writing, as the PC is very accessible and he's able to type faster than he can write. Another transformation for Danny was also his passion for reading, or passion for books through Audible. Technology enabled him to connect to vocabulary and to connect with literature. He says in his report about Audible, "I like it because I don't like reading because it hurts my eyes. But Audible, I can listen to books, and I have millions of books. I've listened to 5 or 6 series of books. The genre range from magical to Aragon about dragons and more magic. It teaches me loads of words. And if I'm writing a story, the stories inspire me to write. I like writing on a PC, but on paper, I don't like it because it's too hard." In his findings, he reports that enjoyment is a massive theme and a very vital aspect of his educational outcomes. He sees enjoyment itself as an educational outcome. Technology has enabled him to enjoy learning and have the opportunity to access and be exposed to different learning methods. His transformation for Danny has contributed to a more socially just education for him and will allow him to reach his full potential. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Badra. That was really fascinating. We're now going to move into break and reflection time. So we've got 10 minutes now to have a break. And please feel free at this point. I'll hand over to Chrissy, I think, who's just going to talk us through what we're going to be doing in the break.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to all the participants for these lovely presentations, and especially the keynote speakers and all the snapshots. So we are going on a 10-minute break now, and when we come back, we're going to introduce a second set of snapshots, and after that, we're going to have questions and discussion. So we will be back in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will get started with the second part of this afternoon's schedule. The snapshots we have been presented with so far have demonstrated how children and childhoods are often defined with deficit models, and adult power privileges the way children and childhoods are considered. Complex views are formed around and with the absence of children. Absence is not just of voices, but an absence of form and context. Hopefully, through ongoing discussion, we can consider how the emotional child, the physical child, the intelligent child, the social child, the technical child, the economical child, the environmental child. There are so many adjectives we could apply to describe child. And yet, as we do so, the descriptions somehow start isolating and sever the child from the other dimensions that contribute to their identities, relationships, and experiences. And this is a challenge that I think we find as we focus in on our own narrow or narrowing perspectives of child and childhoods in our research.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joy. When we start to think about the relationships that make up childhoods, it becomes difficult to kind of untangle them. And I think some of the time during the pandemic, we started to find that these relationships were blurred even further. The relationships in and between homes, schools, healthcare, families, technologies. These childhood relationships are undergoing transformations, and it's so exciting to bring together such a wide variety of research that's looking at some of these. And tonight we want to ask how we can think about childhood that doesn't kind of categorize, fracture, or erase the child, but instead sees children emerge as rich, resilient, and relational. And we hope that these snapshots resonate with your work and provoke thoughts and ideas. And we really hope towards the end, as we're watching these snapshots, that you're thinking about that, and that we'll have an opportunity to share that at the end.
Thank you, Joy and Hannah. As you have rightly summarized, that the snapshots that we heard so far that made it clear that experiences of childhood are not universal. And especially with the ongoing global pandemic, we have seen that experiences of children with various relations and with different aspects of life and family have undergone a metamorphosis. So what is the way ahead? As a recent issue of Lancet has focused that child-centered agenda is required, focusing on the future of children in the post-pandemic world. As per the article, it says that putting children at the center implies radical change, ensuring sustainable food systems to nourish growing bodies, ensuring families have time and resources to raise children, redesigning neighborhoods to give children spaces to play, and passing on a healthy planet for children to inherit. In the next set of 3 snapshots, we will look at 3 more presentations focusing on different aspects of childhood. I shall be speaking about the parental experience of engaging with children's learning in the digital world, while Elizabeth will speak about the multidimensional nature of parental engagement. And finally, to wrap it up, Joy will highlight how to give children voices in the safeguarding context. So in my presentation about the relational child, I shall focus on the parents and their experiences of engagement in the digital world. As we all agree that parents are the first teachers of their children, and even when children start school, they spend the major part of their waking hours out of school setting. Educational experts have long since stressed on the importance of parental engagement, whereby they are regarded as co-educators. The global pandemic has shifted the focus back onto the parents. Children in many parts of the world are still out of school, unable to play or socialize outside the home. Home education has become the new normal, with the importance of digital tools and technologies established as the alternative learning media for the future. In such a scenario, my research touches on the aspect of digital technology as mediator of parental engagement and learning in the family. I'm looking at the Asian Indian ethnic minority parents, trying to grasp their experiences, coming from a diverse cross-section of socioeconomic background, and engaging with their children's learning by using digital technology and media. One theme that I would like to focus on here is the dichotomy whereby parents and children's relation with digital tools have been viewed as either highly positive or in very negative terms. For example, my colleague Fadua just spoke before about the experiences of young Danny and how he got back his love for learning through using digital media and technology while being out of school during the pandemic. However, in my interaction with parents, I have also seen just the opposite. I've seen their anxiety and worry on their part about ensuring safety of their children in the digital world, where many a times they feel powerless and without any control. While parents in general are keen for their children to develop digital competence, they equally fear that this technology is putting children's well-being, both physical and mental, at risk. The dominant Western construction of childhood in the 19th and much of the 20th century oscillates between that of devil or as innocent angel is being echoed in the parental perception of their children's engagement with technology. According to Valentine, parents perceive their own children as innocent and vulnerable, as being in danger, while perceiving other people's children as out of control, posing a threat to the moral order of the society and thus posing as the dangerous child. The image I have chosen here gives a glimpse of the learning practices in a familial setting. It also shows the imposing figure of the mother, guiding and explaining some digital content to the child while keeping a close eye on the child's activity. While protecting the child, we can feel the restrictions it imposes on the child to explore his creativity and freedom. In my research, I have spoken to parents who talk about these dilemmas in the digital world. One of the mothers that I interviewed shared her anxieties about her 8-year-old son and how he got addicted to online gaming introduced to him by one of his friends. She said that the game was violent and she had no control of whom the child is playing with. The child got so much obsessed with it that it changed his behavior and made him more aggressive and irritable. So she intervened and gradually restricted the use of digital devices by the child. Also, he has been asked to avoid the other child as he spends most of the time in online games without any control by the parent. The digital media is seen both as a space where different experiences and learning takes place, and alternatively as a space for stalkers and groomers of uncontrolled behavior and of unknown danger. Another parent that I spoke to about how he told me that he examines the content of the digital platforms before making it accessible to the child. Another parent talked about how she prefers that her children engage in online activities only when adults are present to supervise and insists that children do that in the common living area of the family. So focusing too narrowly on physical access and oversimplifying digital inequalities into two categories of haves and have-nots will not be able to encapsulate this new reality. I think a more nuanced understanding of digital ability and knowledge along with access is required. SIMS 2014 talks about differentiating practices in the context of digital inequalities, which focuses on the need to apply a socio-cultural lens to explore digital practices of families that account for the wider social context. In another empirical study with school-age children in England, Wilkins 2017 observed that parental interventions through concerns of safety, beliefs about the value of technology for learning and future economic success often lead the parents to enable their children to use digital tools, but for the correct purposes, and prioritizes formal learning activities over entertainment or socializing. In the home context, parents are often the gatekeepers of technology use, whereby they control access and direct engagement with digital tools for their children. Studies have found that even children belonging to similar socioeconomic groups, experiencing similar range of supportive actions and interactions from parents and other family members for using digital tools for learning, have different experiences. The children's experiences were different because they were located in specific family context with distinct cultural pathways. In my work, I shall be using Vygotsky's sociocultural theory and this concept of mediation, whereby learning development is shaped both by cultural tools and mediational means that individuals and groups employ. A recent study shows that there is limited information on parental perspectives and their abilities to facilitate their engagement in the digital world. I feel that strategies are required to work closely with parents to help them to use technology to support their children's learning, and that will be very crucial in the pandemic world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mitali. That was fascinating. I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth now.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me and see me properly?
Yes, both. Yeah, hear you very clearly.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Neyada, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Bath, and I'm currently in my second year doing my data collection. My research explores parental engagement and the relationships formed between parents and schools in international baccalaureate IB schools in Athens, Greece. Parental engagement is a concept that has increasingly appeared in academic research and school practice in the last decade, with educators and parents discussing its definition, practices, determinants, and implications. It seems that parental engagement is a wide umbrella term that includes several elements, yet does not have a single definition. For example, it entails participation in children's learning, schooling, and education, parents' activities, attitudes, and mindsets and practices when it comes to parental participation, but also relationships and dynamics between educators, schools, and parents. My research explores how parental engagement is understood, manifested, and constructed in IB schools in Athens, Greece. So it will look at the dynamic relationships between parents and schools, parents and children, and parents and educators that are prime motivators of engagement. Participants in my research include parents and educators in the IB diploma program, so in the 2 last grades of high school. Data is collected in 5 schools using qualitative methods of participant observations, interviews, focus groups, and documentary analysis. Then, the processes and relationships that underpin parental engagement within as well as across schools will be analyzed to compare engagement practices among them. So I intend to raise questions to parents and educators to witness how they perceive parental engagement and family-school relationships from their own perspective. For instance, some of the questions that I will ask them and that are relevant to today's presentation have to do with relationships and dynamics. So what is the role of a parent in the context of school? In turn, what is the role of an educator in the context of school? Do parents participate in their child's learning, academics, or school experiences as a whole? And if so, in what ways? How do we individually and collectively, as educational communities, as parents or teachers or using different identities, do we define parental engagement? To that end, I will assume a relational approach to explore what attributes, approaches, and actions do educators and parents take to promote or hinder parental engagement. Finally, I intend to explore what relationships at school do parents and educators value the most. So I want to see how we can work together in a partnership to build successful and healthy parent-school relationships. Relating to the keynote presentation by Dr. Luff, I reflect upon my own childhood feelings, emotions, and experiences that are depicted in the image I've chosen to share with you today. The image shows two children holding hands in an open, interactive museum space while admiring a piece of art made of wood and plants. In my opinion, the image depicts the essence and meaning of childhood as I experienced it, and I hope my children to experience too. Carefree, in the company of other children, in stimulating environments, indoors and outdoors, at home and school, and in many different other places, with emotions like affection, love, play, and gentle parental guidance. The image captures the multidimensional nature of parental engagement as a process, coming in all shapes and sizes, formal and informal, direct and indirect, individual and collective, personal, impersonal, at school or at home. In this image, parents discreetly follow their children, assuming that they have provided them with the necessary tools, knowledge, and emotions for children to move forward with confidence and independence in their own right. This is my ideal view of parental engagement, and I would like to see how parental engagement is played out in different contexts and cultures in IB schools. I believe that through parental engagement, by uncovering relationships between educators, parents, and children, I will have the opportunity to create new links between places, that is schools, people, namely educators and parents, and ideas, parental engagement. To conclude, I'm hoping that events such as this one organized by DERA and important contributions by researchers like all of us will incite participative dialogues to transform childhood relationships and empower parents and educators. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Another really fantastic, fascinating snapshot. Over to you, Joy.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you, Elizabeth. In this webinar, we've been presented with the relational child's social, political, environmental, and technological entanglements. My snapshot will focus on how young people can be protected or harmed by human associations, and how important it is to offer children clear definitions of different types of unhealthy relationships. I suggest that by encouraging young people to talk about their friendships and people they interact with, they will be more confident to speak out and have frames of reference to know they are listened to, heard, and believed. In safeguarding narratives, it is not uncommon to hear the terms stranger danger and grooming used simultaneously. To develop a more preventative safeguarding approach, defining the significant difference between these exploitative behaviors is essential. McHalden, 2006 and 2012, argues groomers intentionally become known. They manipulate and groom numerous people, families, groups, clubs, institutions. Whole communities are groomed into perceiving the perpetrator as upstanding and trustworthy. The relationships the groomer cultivates with others in the community silences victims, making it extremely difficult to speak out and feel confident about being believed. Strangers can be dangerous. Recently, with their brutal and untimely deaths, Sabrina Nasser, Sarah Everett, Nicole Smallman, along with her sister Biba Henry, have exemplified how dangerous strangers can be. Yet when the slogan of stranger danger is the only safeguarding message we offer young people, we do them a disservice because strangers are often helpful, safe, and supportive resources in many harmful and dangerous situations. Furthermore, by attributing danger only to strangers, we present our young people with criteria for measuring safety or risk that may be inadequate for identifying harming individuals. To develop a preventative safeguarding strategy to protect children from exploitative relationships, we need a more open narrative about how both known and unknown people have the ability to make us feel unsafe, uncertain, manipulated, frightened. In my research, I encourage families, parents with their 11 to 13-year-old children, to have conversations about how they define the difference as a family, how they describe the difference between stranger danger and grooming. These definitions, therefore, are contextualized inside the child and their family's social environments and lived experiences. I have intentionally arranged for these conversations to happen at a family level because groomers, to be successful, need to isolate their victims from their secure social networks, thereby situating the family in a unique position. Sheldon in 2021 identified in historical cases of sexual abuse, silence kept parents unaware for decades, sometimes forever, of their child's experiences, exemplifying how successful groomers' manipulations can be at isolating children from their secure spaces of safety. Engaging in these conversations enable families to develop agreements and consider appropriate responses if such challenging and unwanted events were ever visited on them. Furthermore, critically and understanding the developments in these domestic exchanges can safeguard against other forms of harm, especially online interactions where relationships are more opaque and algorithms can form dangerous echo chambers for misinformation, extremism, and violence. These conversations are not necessarily easy, and they are not a complete panacea to the problem. Children who don't have access to their parents because of illness or other life events need to be considered in this development. Nonetheless, though, these discussions go a lot further than a stranger danger narrative by enabling children and their parents to be more aware and have greater criticality regarding safety and risk. Talking with their parents in spaces away from crisis or immediate harm permits children to build the language and the confidence to speak the unspeakable. And that concludes our snapshot presentations. I now hand you over to the chairs who will facilitate the questions, answers, and discussion phase of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. What a fantastic set of speakers we've had. Really, really fascinating. As Joy said, I'm going to open the floor now for discussion. We have a number of questions in the chat that Chrissy and I will relay to you, and we can have a discussion and a response. So I think the first question that I've got here is actually for Fadwa from Martin Needham. And Martin asks, Fadwa, do you think children's school worlds should be connecting more with their digital worlds? And if so, how might that be?
Rita, can you just confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, okay. Yes, Martin, thank you for your question. I think it's not just schools connecting to digital worlds, but just connecting to the child's world and the child's reality. The digital world is part of our world, right? It's our reality. So I believe that we as adults live in our reality, but in schools are very much detaching children from that reality in some ways. There's plenty of evidence in educational research that calls for embracing technology and adjusting our education system to the child's reality and to the digital world. And I believe by avoiding it almost, we are creating more gaps in different areas. So we're creating more gaps in educational attainment, social cohesion, But something that I'm most passionate about is we're creating a big gap for children's passion to learn. And school has become a chore rather than a place where they would love to go to learn. Just an example where this is supported. I mean, we may all be familiar with the educational experiment of Dr. Sugata Mitra, The Hole in the Wall, where he explains, and you can see that with trust and even without an adult facilitator, children are just curious beings, and they will go on computers and on various digital devices to learn. And it's just that they're in, and they are led by the interest. So when children go on YouTube, or they follow their interest, and there's always opportunity to learn whatever they choose to open up, or what app they choose. So I think we really should embrace it. So not only connecting to the digital world, but just to the children's reality and children's world as well. I hope that answers your question.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Badia. That was fascinating to hear. And I liked your example as well a lot. So the next question I can see on my screen is for Hannah. And the question is from Helen, who asks, did you find, Hannah, that some children with emotional or social needs had less or more access to this play experience?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think that there are, that really varies depending on, where the children are. There are, some schools that are, encouraging time to using different kind of play therapy, or using time in, to go and have time in playtime outside classrooms as a way of, helping children, to develop those skills, or to have a kind of relief from some of the stresses that go on in classrooms. But again, that's not something that goes on everywhere. But I do think it's something that is really important in the group of that I'm working with at the moment. That there's such a variety of different needs amongst the children, and it's so different what they get out of it and how they respond to it. But that's the kind of great thing about outdoor play, the fact that you're not expecting all of the children to be doing the same thing at the same time as you would in classrooms. And so I think that's kind of what is why it suits children. We were talked earlier about how it's not a homogenous group who all would do the same thing. And that's what I think is so great about these opportunities to do something where everybody gets to choose their own activity.
Thank you, Hannah. We've got a question for Sarah here from Helen. Sarah, that was fascinating. Could you say a little more about how the storytelling activity worked? Did it involve all the children or just refugees?
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Helen, for your question. It's really good that I got this question. So what happened was, for the ethical reason, the classroom was already set, so I did not want to make any exclusions in terms of who wants to participate. All students in the classroom were welcome to participate. And the good thing is, refugee and non-refugee students all were interested. Not all of them, obviously, in the class, but I've got around 10 students in total in two classrooms, so 10 in one and the other in the other 10 in the other class. The workshops at the beginning, so the storytelling started really with, so how it was there was a series of workshops based on values that address the issues found in the context regarding the integration processes. And then the students got to vote what value they want to discuss in each of the narrative construction, the storytelling sessions. They chose what to do with it, and they chose what technique they wanted to do. Some of them were not very valuable. Some of them chose to just talk about it. So different ways to express their narratives. And throughout the workshops, the only narratives that were taken mainly for the analysis were refugees narratives, but I did not disregard the non-refugee children's narratives, as they added a lot to the context. At some points, I had to talk about the relational construction of their stories together. So there were instances where they've done it together, so we had to include it. So I hope that answers the question. Sorry, I had to just put the context clear.
Lovely, thank you very much, Sarah. The next question is for Mitali, and the question is from Liz. So, Mitali, did parents in your study view children's engagement in digital worlds as separate or distinct from other aspects of family life?
Hello, thank you for the question. I didn't catch the name of the person who asked the question, please.
It is Liz.
Okay, thank you, Liz. In the interviews or in interaction with the parents that I have so far had, some of the parents had given me this impression that they see the digital media as something distinct from the traditional way that learning is held in the school or in the familial setting. But I think there is like great divergence. Some parents, they accept the digital tools and the digital media of the modern day as part of their child's world, as part of something which the child should learn because of its future importance of the developmental and the economic resources it will provide in the future. But some of the parents, they are very anxious. They are fearful of the technology, maybe because of their own pedagogical history. They didn't have that much exposure to the digital media at that time. So maybe because of that lack of experience, they fear it as something new, as something which they have very limited control over. So it's like a mixed bag of experiences. It's not that the parental experience is not homogeneous or uniform.
Thank you, Mitali. We have a comment, Fadwa, from Martin in response to your response. He says, thank you, Fadwa. In early childhood education, adults are sometimes discouraged from interrupting children's play. Like you, I worry this neglects opportunities to connect experiences. The next question is, I think, is probably directed at any of you, really. It's from Dr. Penny Hay, who says, hello all, fascinating set of presentations, thank you. How would you change especially English, the English education system to place agency in learning at the heart? I'll open that out to both panel organisers and speakers. Who would like to respond? So how would you change the English education system to place agency in learning at its heart? Big question.
I don't know if others are going to contribute, but I just thought that to share some of our own experiences, because we have done some research around pupil voice in classrooms in earlier settings. And our experiences say that to start from everyday activities, because teachers might see it as an additional chore to do. So just it probably needs to be integrated within the everyday tasks and within everyday activities, and starting from the attitudes of adults and looking at the principles of child agency and the participation, and also recognizing that it's not that we don't do it already. A lot of the time it is there, and recognizing the fact that we do it, but maybe not in a very systematic or coherent way. So just making use of those everyday activities and making some small changes to respect child agency and to develop it further.
I think linked to what Malika said from that project, the focus of that project as well was integrated arts and bringing arts into learning. And I think that arts have a lot of potential in integrating arts with other subjects across the curriculum, to give children voice to and different means to express their ideas. One thing that came out of that project was that arts-based approaches were quite inclusive of children who didn't always traditionally fit well or shine in the everyday classroom, and teachers had some surprises about from what some children could offer when the context was dance or drama or visual art.
And just linking it back to the principles, like I said earlier, on children's rights, especially if people are familiar with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Children, pointing it back to the Article number 12 and 13 about the right for the children to participate, which includes participate in education, plus, like Paulette said, giving them the opportunity to express themselves in multiple ways. It's multimodality of learning and expressing themselves. For example, the use of the arts, not just make speech or writing the dominant means of interacting and participating, but respecting different ways of multimodality of participation.
Thank you, Malika.
Can I add to that, please? It's like Dr. Penny says, it's a very big question, but I've been pondering about it for a while as I home educate my own children, and I run an educational co-op for home educators, and we have about 20 different children of various ages, all learning at the same time. And the question also relates to comments made in the chat by Liz and Rosanna. There are models outside of the UK where this has worked. And I think the first step, what we should be looking at doing is if something doesn't work, then we should look at alternative and not trying to make it enforce it. So exam-based education, that has been proven now for so many years that it just doesn't work. And we've seen other countries who moved away from that now, that alternative methods do work. And what I can see in a very small, of course, educational co-op for home educators is that we don't have boundaries. So we just have one big space and we have resources. And children do learn once they have access to the right resources. And once you have knowledgeable teachers who can facilitate learning and can monitor their language skills, see which group is, which students are lacking, I don't know, if we say, for example, English language, need some help with, connecting adjectives or with some maths skills. You can combine maths into geography and geography into history and history into language. It doesn't have to be subject-based in order to be, because the reason why we're doing it is because we have exam-based education. I think that is the biggest barrier. And yeah, for me, schools break down all the walls, make it one open space, let children have access to whatever area they are passionate about. And teachers, our teacher training is great in the UK, and they come out from teacher training being so passionate about learning. And then once they go into school and put things in practice, they are very restricted. So if we have fantastic teachers, why can they not be trusted to facilitate learning instead of making them sit down and be taught? So that will be my ideal solution.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Fadjo. And I think this really nice links with a comment by Helen Hooley that says, isn't that idea of dyadic relationship being challenged by decolonization of the curriculum and our way of seeing the world? So I think it depicts what you just mentioned, Fadjo. Another question I have on the chat is for Joy. And it is from Helen Hooley, who asks, Joy, did your research consider new forms of families, such as adoption, guardians, foster care, and how children understood physically distant, risky people?
Unfortunately, not yet, Helen. My research was looking, it wasn't designed to be looking at heteronormative relationships in that way, or to look primarily at non-adopted or looked after children or foster children, but the outcome was that's the participants I got in my study. I of course would like to explore it further, and I think part of what I really wanted to do was to remove the emphasis on safeguarding at the moment, and in the Sheldon report even, on parents being educated about how to keep their children safe, and on children being educated about how to be kind and respectful to other people. And the two are just these two very separate pools that actually don't enable the child to have even the words to describe I'm not feeling safe, or being certain that they can actually say those words, let alone talking to the power of maybe someone that is in their community who they know, who their parents trust, who has built these positions of trust. We are putting so much emphasis on children to disclose and to talk about things that are really, really difficult for them to talk about. And we're not enabling them. And by keeping the family or the carer and the child in separate spaces in those dialogues or in those learnings, we are doing a disservice. And I think it comes also with the, what I emphasized in my snapshot, we need to be really clear about our definitions, and the logo slogan of stranger danger is just very inadequate. I hope that's answered your question, Helen. I would obviously like to explore alternative or other family and other group settings as well.
Thank you, Joy. And Helen also says that her research is about a sense of security for domestically adopted children. So she says it would be great to chat with you. So that's part of the purpose of this event, to really make some connections. So we're coming to the end of our event now. And first of all, thank you to all the speakers, the keynotes who kicked it all off for us, the organisers who've been brilliant, and the speakers generally. It's been fascinating to listen to you. There are so many concluding remarks. I wouldn't know where to start, but I did start by looking at that poll you kindly responded to first thing. And that asked you, what could transform children's relationships for the better? And what I noticed, I mean, most of us are researchers here, so we look for patterns. What I noticed was the enormous number of affective states that you think need to be transformed that would really help children. So you used words such as connection, positivity, impulse control, belonging, compassion, love, trust. And the keynotes talked about relational culture and the importance of linking theory and practice and observing children, but also linking the past to the present. When I listened to the snapshots, I heard connection and belonging coming up quite a lot. Hannah's work about connection with nature, Sarah's work about belonging, and the fact that, integration is not just about structural issues, but it is all about a relational experience to feel a sense of belonging when you're an outsider. And the other speakers, you know, with technology and connecting with learning, Fadwa and Mariam. And later on, the second sets of speakers started to get us to think about parents and family contexts, and the importance of looking at the context within which those relations happen. So I think there are some huge questions raised from this this event. For me, I've come away thinking, I wonder what a relational culture will look like. But I'm going to move on to ask Chrissy what her thoughts are.
Thank you, Rita. That really sums up how everything is interconnected and how the responses in the poll and the questions are all related with what the speakers have been talking about in this event. I would like now to move on to see what are the next steps. And I would like to ask the organizing panel a question. What do you envisage the next steps to be about transforming childhood's relationships? So anyone from the organizing panel would like to comment on the next steps?
I will just jump on in there, Chrissy. The awkward silences on Zoom, we don't need them on a Friday evening, do we? I think a lot of it is about just being aware that by connecting, by talking, by engaging, by speaking, we can create these networks and systems, and you know, continuing the dialogue with children, with practitioners, with ourselves, and being curious about things that are happening and why they are occurring or reoccurring, and if that's what we want them to be doing. I don't know if any of my colleagues would like to contribute. Oh.
What I feel is that you know, when we are talking about children and their various relationships, we have to widen our perspective. We have to, you know, look at the events and the happenings from across the world, and not, you know, keep ourselves limited to a very Eurocentric or kind of a Western disposition, and just to understand the ground reality, you know, to give us a far more, you know, rational perspective. I think that there is a need to widen the dialogue and to see like what children are experiencing the world over.
And also appreciating the same old debate of being, becoming, and belonging, maybe just respecting the being part. They are children right now, of course. We do want to think about and plan about the future, but just respecting the being part and the belonging part. So that definitely would help to uphold the rights of the children as well.
There is a comment in the chat from Martin, who's pointed out that he thinks the sessions highlighted some of the tensions between different rights. Does the session highlight the need for holistic and not compartmentalized approaches? I don't know if people have any thoughts on that. Certainly the early childhood researchers will be familiar with that integrated approach.
I can chip in. I apologize. I can't find the hand up sign. My mind is completely switched to Teams now, so I can't find it on Zoom. But yeah, I think you are absolutely right. There is always a risk of starting to segment look at rights into different segments. We should just keep reminding ourselves it is about the holistic development of children and rights, even although we can, for the sake of understanding, I think we can divide them into different ways, whether it's political, civil, economic rights, or is participation, protection, or provision of services right. But they all overlap. None of the right would work in isolation. They're all dependent on each other. So I think you are absolutely right. There is a risk of compartmentalizing the rights, but just keep reminding ourselves. And it's hard unless children feel protected and safe, like Joy, what you were talking about. They will never have the confidence to tell anyone about the abuse, any problem. It's that part, the voice does not come to surface if they don't feel safe in the environment. So you can clearly see that the two rights, protection and participation, they overlap. And that kind of services, that safe environment is again, adults, have to provide that safe environment to the children. So yes, I do agree with the comment you make. And it is important to just tell ourselves and just keep reminding ourselves. For the sake of understanding, for the sake of theory, yes, we can look at rights in different ways, but when it comes down to practice, they do overlap.
Great, thank you very much, Malika. And I can read on the chat as well some lovely comments that the delegates have found the presentations fascinating, and thank you very much for the lovely words. Now, I would like to thank everyone for participating, and thank you once again for coming. I hope you found all the presentations and our discussions enlightening. You can follow the Bureau website for any upcoming events, and feel free to get in touch with the delegates, with the participants and the speakers for more connections. We're always open to collaborations, which is part of our aim as well as a SAIC. Here are some of the email addresses for the organizing panel, and do stay in touch. Thank you very much, everyone, and a big thank you to our keynote speakers.